Hey everyone, this is Ian from the Empty Cup podcast. I haven't done anything on the Empty Cup podcast for a while, and what I've done has been pretty sparing. I've really been working on another channel, a channel in which I talk about growing up Generation X. It is called Retro Serial, and I'll leave a link to that channel in the description box below. But recently on the podcast and on the YouTube channel, I had Sensei Ando on there, and we talked about martial arts stuff and growing up Generation X. So I thought it'd be a perfect crossover. So what you're about to hear is not technically an Empty Cup podcast, but it's technically a retro serial interview with Sensei Ando and talking about growing up Generation X. So just wanted to give that brief introduction to the introduction. So there's going to be another introduction. So what you're listening to basically is an episode of Retro Serial. And if you are interested in, well, if you're interested in seeing more Empty Cup podcast stuff, please leave me a comment. I never want to say never. I am interested in bringing it back, but I don't know if people really want me to bring it back. If there's that level of interest, if there is, let me know. And if not, you're welcome to follow me over on Retro Serial. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description box below, and as well, it's on all podcast platforms. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. And here is that episode. We are talking about growing up martial arts in the 70s, 80s, and 90s next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, welcome to today's program. I'm your host, Ian C. I'm glad you could be joining me for today's program. On the program today, we have Sensei Ando, and we are going to be talking about what it was like to grow up during Generation X, being a martial artist. We talk a little bit about movies, we talk a little bit about the culture, we talk a little bit about growing up Generation X and being martial artists, which I'm sure will appeal to a lot of people. It may not appeal to everybody who watches this channel. I know we do a lot on arts and entertainment here, but today we're going to be talking about this subject. But I'm actually repeating myself because I say all this in the introduction to the interview. So we're going to get to that interview, and I'll save all that for then. But before we do, please do me the honor of liking this channel, subscribing. Those two things right there, they mean the world to me. If you could hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button, it would mean a lot. Also, if you want to share this on your favorite social media, let everybody else know about the wonderful nostalgia and retro action you are receiving right here on this channel. Share it. Twitter, thumbnail, face nail, face, Twitter, whatever it is you share these things on. MySpace, Friendster, all those good places that you share stuff on, and let everybody know about this channel. That would mean a lot to me as well. Hit the bell notification if you are interested in knowing when these things are available. And what else can you do? Oh yeah, you can part with some of your hard-earned cash. Yes, in the description link below, I will provide a link to the Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate some of your money to make all of my wildest YouTube dreams come true. Thanks so much, and now let's get to the interview. All right, we have Sensei Ando on a Zoom call with me from the Happy Life podcast. How are you doing, Ando?
Top of the world, my friend. How are you today?
I am doing really good. I am really happy and elated that you have decided to join us on this podcast. You were a regular guest on another podcast that I used to host, and this is quite different from those, but not today. Today it's going to be a little bit overlapping. Normally I talk about things, growing up Generation X is what this podcast is about, and generally we talk about things like movies, music, television shows, all that stuff, but occasionally I get into some other areas. I did what it's like growing up deaf during Generation X, and I interviewed some deaf people. I talked a little bit about the different types of therapies that were developed, couples therapies that were developed during Generation X. And today I want to talk about something that's near and dear to me. Many of the people who know this, that they're listening to this podcast, know that I am an avid martial artist. I've been practicing martial arts in some form since I was 4 years old. Took my first class when I was 8 years old, official class when I was 8 years old, and have not really ever stopped. And I know that your story is involved too. So I want to talk about, because it was such a big part. Growing up Generation X, we had, what did we have? We had Kung Fu, right?
Kung Fu,
David
yeah,
Carradine.
sure.
We had Dave,
True.
we had all the ninja movies, right?
Lots of those. Yep.
And we had the Karate Kid, right?
True.
We had the Karate Kid, and then we had one of my favorite movies, The Last Dragon.
Yeah, there you go. That's a sentimental favorite. Okay, yeah. Show enough.
Show enough. And before we jump into martial arts culture of Generation X, growing up Generation X, tell me some of your absolute favorite martial arts movies of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like when you want to geek out on martial arts and you want to geek out on those movies, what's your go-to?
Boy, yikes. So many. I don't even know which ones I should admit to. The popular choice is Enter the Dragon. That's pretty much what began my interest in martial arts to begin with, seeing Bruce Lee controlling his body so well and his confidence. As a young guy, I just thought, okay, whatever he's doing, I want to be part of that. So that was kind of how I got started in martial arts. Then it got kind of, there was also the influence. I mean, back in the 80s for sure, the Stallone movies, the Schwarzenegger movies, there was a lot of muscle movies. And I don't know how that kind of bridges into martial arts, because those guys would big punches, saw blades cutting off heads, lots of machine guns. But the Rambo thing and the commando thing was also an influence in the martial arts for me, because even though Bruce Lee was really a wiry guy and a small guy, which I related to, like, okay, I'm a thin guy. My brother's bigger. A lot of guys at school are bigger. So Bruce Lee was like the first prototype. But the movies of the 80s, when it started getting a little more meaty, that took me off path for a while, because I was still interested in martial arts. But then I was like more into weightlifting and trying to gain weight and protein shakes and Joe Weider and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of like part of the martial arts for a while. And I really kept doing that for probably 20 years, kept trying to gain muscle and I couldn't. But along the way, so I'm going to start with Enter the Dragon, and then kind of the adding in some weight training based on Stallone and Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
And then you get into the Steven Seagal, Above the Law. The first time I saw that, that's what got me out of my garage and into a school, because I realized I didn't know what he was doing. I couldn't figure it out. Slow motion on my VHS, I couldn't figure it out. So I tried to go out and find an Aikido school. And then, so the two big ones were Enter the Dragon and Above the Law. And then in the middle there, Rambo 2 and Commando. Those movies are kind of my milestone movies. And then lots of silly things in between.
Those are some great shows. And there is overlap in those. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be a commando or you're going to be a Rambo Green Beret, you've got to know how to handle your hands and feet.
Absolutely.
I mean, what happens when you drop your weapon? You've got to be able to handle, punch and kick. So, all right. So we're going to dive in deep into geeking out martial arts schools and growing up as a martial artist. So you were young like I was. So I was born when Enter the Dragon came out. And when Enter the Dragon came out, you're saying that that's kind of what got you into martial arts. So, I mean, Bruce Lee, of course, I mean, my main style that I've done a lot is JKD. But
I'm sorry about that.
I don't know why you're sorry. I don't know what.
We're going to turn this into a martial arts podcast, whether you like it or not. I thought I'd throw out a challenge right away. No, but back to the cultural. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. But you got interested in that through the. How old were you when that movie came out? About.
Well, I was born in 70. That movie came out, 73? 70,
yeah, 73. So you probably didn't influence you at 3 years old.
Not at 3. Yeah, no, I did not. I was probably still in Superman. Superman was my first hero. The TV show would be my first martial arts influence. I thought I could bust through walls and bend gun barrels with my hand. But not being Kryptonian, that was a problem. So then Bruce Lee was the next one. But I was not Chinese and didn't know Kung Fu either. So that was a problem. When was the first time you stepped through a school door?
a martial arts school door?
Yeah, that was in my teens. I mean, you started way earlier than I did, getting into a school at 8.
Yeah.
Mine was probably 17, 18. It was late.
Uh-huh.
I had started off as a garage guy. My brother was into the arts. He was caught up in the ninja phase for sure. So during the ninja movie craze, that was not my interest, because to me that was silly. He had the nunchucks and he had the mask, and he was rolling around with his friends and doing weird stuff in camo. And I always thought, well, that's not me. I wear the kung fu suit with the fancy buttons down the front, and that's me, and that's more refined and civilized. And what you ninja guys are doing, that's crazy, throwing stars around. So he was into the ninja movies, and I was the counter to that. What was the question? Oh, so we kind of ended up, we always fought with each other, and then I had some friends who were interested in it. We would have what we called Bloodfest video days, where we would get Commandos and the Rambos and all these kinds of kung fu movies, and on a Saturday we'd kind of watch them back to back. Young men being influenced. I'm not saying it's a great idea, but we did. That was like our blood fest. We called it the blood fest video day. And
it's great.
Then we'd go into the garage and then try stuff out. So that was like the first version of learning. And then eventually my friends weren't really into martial arts that much, but I was. So I got and built myself a heavy bag and got some weights and got some books and started trying to piece things together, and then bring my friends in and try to work out partner drills based on the books and techniques. And then eventually, like I said, by the time I got into my teens, I realized I can't do this by myself.
Was that is that when you started watching Seagal?
Well, when his movie came out, I mean, that was like an R-rated movie, and I don't think I could see R-rated movies legally at that time. I can't remember the exact timeline there, but I knew when I eventually found that VHS, and he was doing Kotegaeshi, and he was flipping people around, I just couldn't figure it out. I'd go frame by frame on the VHS, and I couldn't figure it out. Everything else I thought I could figure out. I was arrogant. Watching Bruce Lee, a lot of those movie movements were silly. He's throwing dummies around or jumping off springboards, and
right.
So that wasn't what I wanted. But just punching and kicking, I got a heavy bag. I got buddies I can spar with, so I figured I could just learn this by myself. I don't need anything. But the Seagal stuff was like, I don't know what he's doing. I can't figure this stuff out. So I knew I had to go find a teacher, and that's what got me out of my garage with my friends into like a school with a teacher, and found a Taekwondo school that also had eventually an Aikido program and so I was in my later teens when I finally got into a school.
Well, what did you think when you got into a school? I mean, was it so I was pretty young, so I don't really remember the tribalism, but I certainly remembered the tribalism when I became a teenager. So when I was 8 years old, my first school that I went to. So when I was 7, I was practicing like just stuff my mom showed me. My mom had gotten a blue belt in Tong Soo or something.
Wow.
And so I started showing an interest in martial arts really quickly at the age of 4. Kung Fu was on TV, and I'd watch that and try to imitate it. And then there was the whole trying to be Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker aspect of it too. And so she showed me like some, like a horse stance and some center punches and a forward stance and stuff like that. Some real basic stuff. And then when I was 7 or 8, we moved to Utah, and there was a 3rd-degree black belt in Isshinryu karate. And I went and studied Isshinryu karate for just on and off for a few years. And I wasn't a consistent kid. I did the garage thing, like you're saying, but at that young age, I don't remember I mean, I didn't know there was all these different karate. I just thought, oh, well, this is a karate school. It wasn't until I was older that I started seeing, oh, well, these people don't like these people. Mm-hmm. Did you experience that when you went into martial arts schools?
Well, I was lucky. My first martial arts school was actually a judo school that rented mat space out to a Taekwondo program. A year after I got there, an Aikido program, traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu program. And my Taekwondo teacher was also highly ranked in Remy Precis's Arnis style. So right from the beginning, even though I was wearing a Taekwondo uniform, and that was the main thing I signed up for, I was always around these other arts. So I just thought every martial art allowed a campus, like a college campus feeling where you could cross train. And now inside the school, people still would talk about each other like, well, we don't do that because you're never going to throw me, and sticks are stupid, and that Aikido doesn't work, and high kicks are not for the street. So there was always, that kind of tribalism. But all in all, we were still friendly with each other and shared the same parking lot and always had to be civil to each other. So it wasn't, I don't think, as extreme as some other places were. Now, because of the age, the part that's hard for younger people to understand without the internet is that we had what we called the yellow pages. So when you did hear about another martial art, like for instance, there was a Black Dragon Kung Fu. I wanted Kung Fu to begin with because it was Bruce Lee.
Right.
But I couldn't find Kung Fu that I could drive to and pay for. So, but there was a Black Dragon Kung Fu school that was in the phone book. And back then, that's all I could learn about a school was like based on the ad in the phone book. Like whatever the logo looked like, I'd stare at it like, what is this? And whatever words they use in the ad, like, oh, we teach this and that. Like, well, what? But unless you drove into a school and walked in and experienced it, it was just a mystery what other people were doing.
Yeah.
And so, in the back of some magazine, like Black Belt Magazine, they would feature different styles, but it's only a couple of photos and an article. Everything just seems so mysterious and so intriguing. And I think fed into an insecurity as a martial artist, where you only have two choices. You're either going to get deeply into tribalism, like, look, I don't know what all these other people are doing out there. It's very mysterious. They might be better than me. So I'm just going to double down on what I'm doing is the best. There is nothing else in the world. And all my security will be based on the fact that my art is the best. Or you could see an opportunity to say, I'm just going to be open-minded because there's so much out there. It's a good thing that there's so much out there. Right now I'm here, but I will be open to going to a seminar over there or order a VHS tape of what they do and try to learn what other people are doing. I think human nature is a lot of people go to the insecure side where they just want to believe that what they're doing is all they ever need. It's one-stop shopping. Everything is magic where you were and everything else is unnecessary. So in my experience, I was lucky that I didn't have extreme tribalism. And I was always open-minded enough to never feel like I had to belong to one art. But I definitely had friends once I got older who I eventually met a student from that Black Dragon mysterious Kung Fu school. And finding out what they did, to me, that was the big difference between being back then and now. The yellow page era and the internet era.
Right.
Like back then, everything was just so mysterious.
Yeah.
What do they do in Hong Kong? What are they doing in Thailand? What are they actually doing? There was no way to look over the wall unless you could get on a plane, or maybe you met someone who had been there, but now they're just telling stories. And I don't know, it's all myth making. It was just really hard to get a sense of where you fit into the big picture of martial arts. It was really hard.
Right.
And nowadays, it's so easy.
It is
easy. Capoeira, you hear about Salat, you hear about whatever you want. You can go Google it and pretty much learn everything you need to know about it. There's no mystery whatsoever. And that's a good thing, I think.
You had to get the books, or you had to be one of those people who were adventurous enough to order the VHS tapes.
Which were expensive for me as a kid.
Yeah.
Panther videos. I remember the back of the magazines, tough-looking dudes selling this, selling that, styles I'd never heard of. I'm like, but I can't afford all this stuff. I mean, so there was no way to really get better unless you could unless you had money. If you had money, you could take off on weekends and go to seminars and travel and maybe go to another country. But if you didn't have money, you were just stuck at your local school and hope it was a good teacher and hope that was enough, because it's not like nowadays. Nowadays, for free, you can learn so much about what everybody's doing around the world. It's just
you can see
don't know how good they have it.
Well, I'll tell you what, even as late as 2003, 2002, this is like the explosion of the internet at this point. But at that time I was heavily into Wing Chun, and there was nobody more tribal that I had ever been to than when I went into Wing Chun for the 5 years I was in Wing Chun. I still do Wing Chun. I love Wing Chun. I love practicing it. I've never stopped doing it. I just do other stuff now. But my Sifu would not even show us he made us leave the room. Like if you were a Sulam Tao student, you were not allowed to learn Chum Kyu. The Chum Kyu people did the forms in either another room or at another time. And Bu Ji you were not allowed to learn Buji, and God forbid you learned the poles or the knives or the dummy. You were not, that was behind closed doors. There was ones for instructors only. And he actually had the school to where there was a hall outside and a closed door, and you waited for your class and you went in, and then if there were instructors doing instructor stuff first, you'd see him come in with the knives and the poles and all that stuff. But that was as early as 2003. I didn't know that, I was like, oh, and then, late 90s, early 2000s, you go on there and you can see Buji. I mean, it's no problem. You can see Samuel Kwok do Buji. You can see all these other people do Buji, but the culture was very different. So it's interesting that you mentioned Black Dragon Society, because I'm sure that you've met, or even you have, even I do this, have styles that you've created out of your experience. Did you ever go to one of those schools that was a mixed style school? That was like where they said, like, well, we call ourselves this, and we're, 4 forms from Tong Soo Do, 2 forms from Kung Fu, 3 forms from, and we do that stuff. That was kind of common, I saw, especially in the 90s. Did you ever run into that at all?
You run into it all the time. Yeah, even now, because with MMA, it's more acceptable to mix styles.
Yeah, but I'm talking. You remember though the classic styles? People were not mixing; they were mixing those classic styles.
Yeah, not back
together.
then. I mean, I was never a student of a place that would say, "Oh, well, we're a mix of this and a mix of that." Not that I think that's any lesser than anything else. It's all about the teacher, right? It's if you have a good teacher who's presenting good material, then I don't care what you call it. And the older I get, the more all these paths converge, because fighting is just fighting. And then systems and styles are just different pathways to get in there. But yeah, again, back then, back in the day, a lot of teachers traded and made reputations based on the mystery of, they knew that you couldn't figure out what was going on. They knew you wouldn't get on a plane and go to Hong Kong to check out what's going on over there. Right. They knew that whatever they said was the real thing. And if then they had mystery within the mystery by saying backroom students, front room students, or you're not allowed to see this. Yeah, I did have one teacher who was very much into the, no, you can't see this. And then when he would show me something, eventually he would say, you're not allowed to show this to anybody. It was always that veil of secrecy on the secrecy, mystery within a mystery, wrapped in an enigma and all that. So that would definitely, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist now. There's, even as I teach, you don't teach everything to everybody. My YouTube channel is a very come one, come all, mainstream, not very controversial list of techniques and concepts. But that's not what I teach my personal students, people I know, who I can take responsibility for, who I can understand what they're coming here for and what kind of person they are. So there is some level of responsibility in what you teach. But definitely back then, I feel there was so much more mystery and people taking advantage of the fact that you couldn't dispel the mystery, that you couldn't see past the veil, that I was happy to see all that. I knew guys who taught karate back then who had a curtain. When the school was open during normal hours, windows open. Karate class starts, you draw the curtain. Nobody from the outside world can see what's going on in there. Very mysterious. Yeah. I knew teachers who would show up right before class. You wouldn't even know what kind of car they drove. You wouldn't know where they came from. They would just suddenly appear for the class. And then as soon as class was over, no locker room talk, no drink after, gone.
Really?
Traded in that mystery.
Yeah.
But nowadays, you can look them up on Facebook. You say, oh, you went to a barbecue. Oh, your kid's a ballet dancer. Now you know.
There are no secrets now that the internet is so common, especially now that it's on our phone. It's yeah. I see my first black belt. I didn't stay in Ishinru for too long. It was just what was available at the time, and it was super popular. When I was 16, I moved to where I'm currently now. And I did go to this style. It was called the White Dragon martial arts system. It's an interesting Black Dragon, but it was a mixture. It was basically 5 animal kung fu and taekwondo and Tong Soo Do. Sorry, so it was all the Tong Soo Do forms and mixed with 5 animal kung fu, and Then later they tried to do Aikido as well. We learned, Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yankyo, the projections and the immobilizations. We learned all that stuff. How well we learned it, I don't know. I don't know. We did have black belts that would go and train and then they would come back. And that was the first style I actually got my first degree black belt in, was the White Dragon martial arts system. And from then on, and this is kind of interesting because you're talking about like internet stuff. So I got really into Bruce Lee when Dragon came out. I know that a lot of people hate that movie Dragon because it's not representative, all that stuff, but I got into Bruce Lee because of Dragon. I originally got all the books, tried to implement all the stuff on my own. There was no JKD teacher. And then finally a JKD teacher that I trained with privately showed up because he was a member of a church I was going to. And I trained with him on and off. It's a long story for 2 years, but you talk about the mystery. This is like the late 90s, mid to late 90s that I was doing this. I couldn't look up anything. You know what I mean? He told me his Sifu, he told me all this stuff, but like, I couldn't like for years, I was just like, well, who are all these people that he mentioned? And who was, but he just showed me what he knew. And he was up for memory lapses. I mean, he was like, I can't remember if that was Pak Sao or Gong Sao. He's like, but it goes like this, or it goes like this, or, and he didn't know the names of anything. And because he didn't know the names, I couldn't just type it in, he's like, I think this is called a Mantis Sao. Bruce Lee got this from Mantis or something. And anyway, it was definitely interesting. The other question I wanted to ask you too is, because there was a lot of that going on. There's two questions looming in my mind here. And number one is how people tested themselves prior to MMA. And because you mentioned something about they all fought, they started looking the same. Where did you see, like you say, oh, this guy comes from Taekwondo school, this guy comes from this school. Yeah, but when you go to this, a lot of those, they all start looking similar because they're all fighting. So where did you go to kind of hone your craft in? What were some of the big things that were happening prior to MMA to hone your craft in to say, does my style actually work above another style? What was that culture like?
That's a very martial arts question. All right. The culture of proving yourself with your fighting techniques, well, it always comes down to partner work, sparring, resistance training, always. MMA didn't make up wrestling. They didn't make up any of the arts that they practice and have combined. They're just another version of it. So there was always sparring. There was always grappling. There's always submissions. That stuff's gone on forever. So nothing new there, but definitely being able to cross test, if that's a word or a phrase, being able to say, okay, well, in your Taekwondo school, you can pressure test and go hard and bang, 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 but there's the rules of Taekwondo that you're probably following. If you're over in a judo academy, then bang, 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 you're doing what you do over there, hard rolls, going for the throws, but there's rules that you're still playing within. So MMA has changed it just by saying, like, great, hey, you're a good judo guy. Why don't you go try that in the Taekwondo school? Oh, you're a Taekwondo guy. Why don't you go try that in the BJJ school? So nowadays, pressure testing doesn't just mean go hard in your own school. It means try to go hard in every school in town and see if you can still do what you want to do. Most people are going to figure out that they can't always do exactly what they want. You're going to need to do other things. So you better know a few things, a few tricks from another style or two to help round you out. So hopefully you can go back to your A game. Back then, you could get away with just having an A game, and unless you got challenged on the street, you could walk around, hey, I'm a champ in boxing. And no, okay, great. And you're great. I'm a champ in judo. I'm a gold medalist in Taekwondo. Great. Well, then no one's going to call you out on that. Okay, well, then you're a champ. But back then, you would think that meant that all martial artists are equal. Like, oh, okay, well, the judo gold medalist is the same as the Taekwondo gold medalist. If you're not a martial artist, that just seems like we are both really good fighters.
Right.
Well, yes, within a particular rule set, good fighters. On the street, already a step away from the metal stuff. But nowadays, I think, even in the mainstream culture where people don't train, nowadays if someone says, oh, I'm a gold medalist in Taekwondo, they'll still say, well, how would you do in the cage?
Yeah, right.
It's not enough to just be a specialist and say, oh, I'm an excellent wrestler. I'm a 2-time All-American wrestler. It's like, cool. Can you punch too?
Yeah.
It's like, now it's not enough to be a
No.
champion of anything. You got to know more,
Yeah.
which is good. I think it's healthy because real fighting demands usually more. So that's good.
Yeah, I do remember and being a part of, and also on the going in and on the receiving end as well, of people coming to your school from other schools and saying, we want to do challenge matches.
Sure.
Most of the time it was friendly. So when I was in White Dragon martial arts system, we actually had 2 Ishinryu schools, one across the street and one above us. And we would cross train with them, and it was fun, but what I remember is, I'm doing a lot of stuff that's flowy and fancy, and these movements and stuff, and they're doing these rigid, hard movements and stuff like that. But when we would start to spar, and this was before MMA, this is just the sparring rules. You're standing up, somebody either continuous point sparring, or one of us would say, okay, we're going to break or whatever. It would really start looking the same. Either the kind of the front kick, round kick. You might pull something off particular to your style. You might pull off a high hook kick or something like that, where the other style only doesn't ever kick above the waist or something like that. Or one person might really rely on that reverse punch to score those points, where the other person might rely on a quick back fist from a kung fu school or something like that. But that was really the extent of the challenge. And then there was the tournament scene. The tournament scene. Were you part of that tournament scene?
I was never a competitor. I was always interested in my own health. I was always interested in self-defense. I did not care about trophies and medals. Did a couple just because if you're in Taekwondo, it's kind of inevitable. You're going to get pulled into a couple. But I never quite got it. It never got into my blood like, oh, this is something you got to do forever. It just seemed like, okay, that's interesting. I don't think it proves anything, because reflecting on what you just said about that other topic, rules dictate behavior. So when everything starts looking the same, it's because they're all following the same rules. I don't care if you came from Taekwondo or you came from kickboxing or Muay Thai. If the rules say you can't kick here, you can only kick there, you get points for this, less points for that, this is illegal, this is okay. Well, the rules kind of dictate how people are going to behave. So if you're sparring and no takedowns are allowed, no grabbing's allowed, no headshots are allowed, oh, well, then maybe that's Olympic Taekwondo. You're going to start, well, I guess we'll just do this. Oh, and you'll be allowed to get more points if you kick to the head, not the legs. All right, well, now Olympic Taekwondo makes a lot of sense. Everyone's going to look like that, no matter what athlete you are or where you come from, because that's the game. It gets interesting when you say, okay, there's no rules. Let's just not hurt each other. Let's spar, but let's just make sure we're okay at the end. But do whatever you want. Now it won't look just like regular kickboxing anymore, probably. Because now you'll have the wrestler taking a shot. Now you'll have the judo guy getting close to clinch up and grab. Now you'll have attacks on the legs and the head, depending on what the athletes. You'll see more variety in technique. So now playing that into the tournament scene, again, what are the rules of the tournament? That was always another issue, because maybe you're really good at a particular style of tournament fighting. Oh, do you want to enter this tournament? Well, what are the rules? Oh, well, those are shorter rounds. I don't like that. Oh, they don't kick to the leg, but I want to. So now you got to be really selective about not just what style do I practice, but what tournaments can I enter to do well in. And now I'm getting even more narrow in my skill set, where I'm a Taekwondo guy in ITF style, or I'm a Taekwondo guy for WTF style, Olympic style. It's like, wow, we're getting so far away from self-defense and the way I think about it, where anything goes, do whatever you want. That's why the tournament scene really just increasingly turned me off. Like, I don't know why. It's already hard enough to play within one style rules, let alone a tournament style rules. Like, come on. So I don't know. That's my personal experience. Were you a big man on the tournament circuit? Was that your jam?
No, I was not. I did go to the Utah Summer Games 3 years in a row and placed every time. I placed, even my first year I was there as a blue belt in White Dragon. I actually have a story about this. I beat a black belt in Wado-Ryu.
Oh, okay. In forms, or is that in fighting? What did you say?
No,
sparring?
in sparring.
In sparring, okay.
Real quick story. So I had made the mistake. So I was a blue belt in this new style that I was in. I was only in it for, a little while. and I was 17, and the guy who was a black belt was also a teenager in Waterloo. And this is nothing to say bad about Waterloo. This is just an experience that happened. Okay. I'm sure there are plenty of Waterloo people that can kick my butt. It's not even hard to kick my butt. Okay. It's not even hard. But because there wasn't enough people to have a black belt teenager, they put him down. And I made the mistake of telling one of the judges, and I mean, it wasn't like any malice or anything. I was just talking to a judge, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been doing martial arts since I was 7 years old, or, his first class I went to. And he was like, well, you can't be in the beginner class. He goes, that's not fair. So he put me up with the brown belts, and they put him down with the brown belts. And so I sparred with him, and I ended up winning. And it was, I mean, he looked so, I have a video of it somewhere, but he looked so much cleaner, so much better. But I was so unorthodox, and I was so nervous that I beat him. I mean, my hand was shaking like this and this, and I go in and punch him and all this stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't a really good martial art, even though I'd been doing martial arts for some time. I didn't, I wasn't clean in my technique.
Sure. Well, I like the lesson of the story being that if you're going to sandbag, don't shoot your mouth off about how you're sandbagging.
Yeah,
everybody.
Of course. Well, no, I wasn't. I did 3 years in a row. We did some local tournaments and stuff like that. But I think people made way too much out of it. I mean, if there's one thing about the 80s, at least prior to the advent of MMA, it was, I was champion of this tournament. And I'm like, okay, look, yeah, I was too, and I beat 2 people. Big deal. And point, you know what I mean? I walk out, I got a gold medal, man. I'm a gold medalist. And I'm like, yeah, but you beat 2 people. It's just like, I was champion at this international thing. Yeah, you fought 3 fights.
Yeah, that happened.
That happened. But it was a big deal.
I think the argument for tournaments, because I'm not against tournaments, it's just it was more trouble than it was worth for me, a little frustrating for my own training. Because again, martial arts to me should be a pathway for people who are not athletically gifted, give them a chance to stand up for themselves and maybe have a chance against someone who's being aggressive and maybe is athletically gifted. And when you get into the tournament scene, you're rewarding the people who are athletically gifted. So if I'm not naturally explosive and fast and well balanced, now I'm in a tournament where this guy's a killer because he's an actual athlete competing for medals and money prizes, and I'm just a guy in a club who, I'm trying my best. You're just going in and you're just getting your confidence destroyed because you're never going to be at a professional level, which is why even people today, when they say, well, would that work in the cage? And what style do you practice? I've never seen that work in the cage. It's like, hang on. Are you comparing the normal person's experience at a martial arts school to elite athletes in their 20s training professionally in a ring in combat? I mean, it's one-on-one, unclothed, basically combat. It's a totally different reality. I'm just training for when I'm 60 and on a cane, how to maybe get some 20-year-old punk off of me. I'm not interested in submitting some world-class big guy. I mean, that's a totally different set of skills, totally different set of expectations, injuries. It's just a totally different thing. So the tournament leads you up into Olympics and gold. And if you're not athletic, it's just sort of a dead end anyway. It's good for the emotional experience, preparation and all that. I get it. But I'm not that athletic. So it would just be me losing a lot. And why am I spending all day driving to these places just to lose a lot when what I want to learn is back at my school or in my garage? That's where I'm making the improvements that I'm looking for, not here with a medal around my neck for beating 2 guys who are having a bad day. He missed breakfast. That guy had diarrhea yesterday from food poisoning, and now I win. I'm the champ. But what is that based on?
Right. Yeah.
I had a good day. That's all.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question: if you were to pick out, let's think of the 80s for just a minute. If you were to think of martial arts culture in the 80s, what are some of the defining features you would say of the 1980s? Like if you were, so you mentioned one, and I think that's a really good one, and that's secrecy.
For sure.
What other features would you say, kind of themes or would you say are of the 1980s
I'm
martial
still gonna
arts?
I'm still gonna throw in the idea that I think perverted me, because again, when I started, it was with kind of a pure vision of confidence. What Bruce Lee was showing me was that even a small guy could be really confident and very self-righteous when he fought and could beat people. And that to me was like the real, that's a path for my life. When the 80s came, it got perverted because Jean-Claude Van Damme comes out, who's like a gifted athlete and a hard worker, I guess. He's doing full splits, 6-pack abs or 8-pack abs, Stallone, all these guys. So that the goals got changed. If you're not careful, when you're a young man, if you don't have big biceps, I don't care if you can defend yourself and you feel better as a person. If you don't look good in a t-shirt, then somehow you're not really a martial artist. So to me, the culture shifted from attitude to appearance.
Right.
And it became a little superficial. And the ninjutsu thing kind of fed into the secrecy part of stuff and veils, masks and everything was potions and secret weapons and blow darts and everything was just that's the secretive part of it. But if you weren't going to be a secretive ninja, then you better rip off your shirt and you better look like you're in great shape. You better be an elite athlete. If you want to be a martial artist, you got to look like that. And that I think was a terrible message that turns most people off. Because if you're overweight or you're not athletic or you're older, then you think, well, martial arts is not for me. It's only for people who look like Stallone, who look like Jean-Claude Van Damme. And that to me, when I think about the 80s, I think about that detour I took into the land of what do you look like as opposed to who are you and what are you doing?
What do you think's the biggest difference between martial arts in the 80s versus martial arts in the 90s? Was there any step forwards? Were there any steps backwards? Do you think there were any huge differences either way in the 90s as opposed to the 80s?
In the 90s, well, look, the UFC thing started in 93.
Yeah, so
right?
that's a huge one.
So that was, that's a big deal. Because, and again, kind of like we were talking about, you mentioned like visiting other schools. And I said, hey, if you were rich, maybe you could take a tour. But the Gracies, who funded and founded that UFC event, they were the ones who said, hey, we're going to open our doors. We welcome you to come into our school and challenge us. And we will show you that what we're doing is better than what you're doing. So in terms of just a cultural shift of instead of I'm going to go into a dojo storming, they would call that, or they don't know I'm coming, but I'm going to walk in and challenge these guys to prove that what I'm doing is better. They have the opposite approach. We're going to put out a welcome mat and welcome you to come in if you want to challenge us. We're ready for you. So I like that kind of switch of psychology where they don't have to go looking for trouble. They welcome, like, you come to us and we'll be ready for you anytime, any place. And that's kind of cool. And then that starts this UFC culture where put up or shut up.
Yeah.
You can open up any school you want and call yourself this and grandmaster that and make up your lineage and secrecy and veils of this and backroom students. And I knew the true lessons from the founder. You can say anything you want. Come on over here and show me what you can do. And either you can do it or you can't. And if you can't, then maybe you should either shut up or put on a gi and start over as a white belt because maybe what you're teaching isn't what you thought it was. So I like that the 90s basically was the beginning of the taking back the curtains. We're taking down the veils, taking down that backroom wall, and being the complete opposite of secrecy. On TV, in front of everybody, here I am, here's what I do, no secrets, let's go. Yeah. So transparency, I think.
I think that's a big deal of it too, because even though the UFC is now turned into like its own sport, at the very beginning it was you do karate, come in against this guy. Let's see how well you do against this guy. Really, minimal rules. No, I think in the very beginning there was even groin shots allowed. I think it was no eye gouging and no fish hooking. Those were the only two. Those were the only two rules. You could do 12 to 6 elbows on the head, and there was and people really did have to say, okay, let's look at what I do. And in my philosophy too, I'm like, you want to do a traditional style, that's awesome, do it. I mean, I do a quote unquote traditional style to some degree. Dig into it, do it as best as you can, and then just don't lie to yourself about its weak spots. What your weak spots are, go and find. This is actually what got me into groundwork. I used to hate groundwork. So I'm not going to do the groundwork. All I got to do is hit somebody in the head if they come in and And that's, I mean, that's all just junk and
We've
all this
all
stuff.
been there.
until I was a black belt in one style, an advanced student in JKD, and an advanced student in Wing Chun, and I got taken down by a purple belt and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and humiliated, and and then I was like, okay, who's the best? What's the best that they do? Let's go for them. Let's go. Let's do the best. That my JKD mindset kind of took over and said, all right, who's doing groundwork? Who's the best at that groundwork? Let's go and train with them. So yeah, practice the style, but don't lie to yourself about its weak spots, and just train the weak spots. If you do Wing Chun, it's great. But you got to have something on the ground. You can't lie to yourself about what you can or can't do on the ground. But This is another question too I wanted to ask you, because this was a big feature that at least I noticed, and it's kind of interesting because you live in a different part of the world, or not a different part of the world, but a different part of America, and it's always interesting to hear other people's stories and how the culture kind of shapes us, because it does. My culture shapes me and my martial arts here. Your culture is going to shape you to some degree where you are and you're learning martial arts. And so does our time. So does what's on TV. So it's what's on the movies. Did you ever run into any martial arts cults or cultic behavior in the martial arts? Because that was a big deal, especially in the 80s and 90s. I think up until the advent of the internet, when you're talking about the explosion of the secrecy. Sure. Martial arts cults. What do you go?
Well, that word obviously conjures up a lot of evil. I mean, to me, I'd like to take a softer definition of that word. The tribalism that you talked about earlier is in itself kind of a cult-like thinking, where your teacher is the best, your style is the best. You don't look at anyone else for information. You just stay there. So that in and of itself is, to me, culty. And absolutely,
but there were a lot of, and I'll be real. I mean, let's just be honest. There were a lot of people who were liars as well. Said they trained with somebody and they didn't really train with that person, and then and that was, you couldn't track that down. And that's kind of what I mean more by I mean that tribalism combined with lies almost. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Well, either way, I think it's unhealthy. Whether the guy was telling the truth about his background or he's not. The problem is, I don't care what the teacher's issues are. As a student, we all have to be very honest about what's this information, how is it helping my life, and is it honest? You brought up the word honesty before. You have to be honest with what you're doing, strengths and weaknesses. And the problem with cult-like thinking or tribalism is that you don't see the weaknesses. You're only seeing that what you're doing is powerful, strong, can't be defeated. That's it, which for the most part, I think has been routed out. Or if that's a word, it's been ground out. Yeah. But absolutely, I remember being in rooms. I don't want to identify particular because they know where I've trained. But I remember very clearly going to a camp in the woods and training. And I would call that the closest I've ever been to a cult, where the teacher is the be-all, end-all. You don't question that teacher. But again, I don't blame the teacher. Well, it's hard to blame the teacher. The teacher must know that they have that effect on people and they're allowing it. So in that sense, the teacher is responsible for creating a culture where it's allowed, they are allowed to be worshiped. But on the other hand, for a student to give away of themselves and only put their focus on the teacher as being the be-all, end-all, better than me, I can never be like them, oh, they're so sacred to me. That's also some issues on the student side. So you have two types of problems going on there. Someone who allows themselves to be worshiped and someone who's willing to worship when neither one is really healthy.
Yeah.
So I've seen that on both sides. I've seen teachers who allow themselves to be worshiped, even though they say that, oh, I'm humble and I'm not, but no, that's part of their ploy. And I've also seen many people who are just, they're not home. They're just not home. They're not thinking for themselves. They don't speak for themselves. And then they teach what the other person taught them, and they have no filter for how it affected their life and how they've had to change it or modify it. It's just, no, this is the word. They gave that to me and I'm giving this to you, and with no changes, unfiltered. There it is. That gets scary. But again, if you're an honest student, then you recognize it as soon as you see that, like, wow, the way you're talking about that lesson or that teacher, or wow, the way that teacher is expecting me to come to them with this particular type of attitude, you sense it, just like in any human relationship, you sense it, and hopefully you back away from it slowly and carefully.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, martial arts culture growing up had a number of um, those cult-like mentality
Sure.
schools, but it should shined a bad light on, because a lot of them were not. A lot of people were not that
Sure.
way. I mean, that's all there. You have a mix of good with the bad, but you did get this gravitation because you have this person who's in front, and you have the girl swooning for him, and you have the boys obeying his commands, and there's no one to check on you. You could strap
Yeah.
a black belt on and say, yeah, I got this black belt over in in Korea when I was there for 10 years training with
Yeah.
can't master last name, we can't track down Chen. And
Right.
and
Absolutely.
unfortunately I did fall for that. I did on two, when I was young. I don't blame myself, but when I was older, I got out of it. I got out of it.
Good.
The Wing Chun school that I went to was very much like that. It was very much secrecy, and he wouldn't even tell us. And what was crazy is it wasn't a reflection on his skill. This guy's skill was phenomenal. He's still one of the, well, he is past now. But his skill was one of the most phenomenal skills. He was known all over the world. But he wouldn't tell us like how long he'd been studying with Yip Ching. He wouldn't tell us. He was kind of embarrassed about his time that he spent with Lung Ting, is where he started, and he was embarrassed about that. So he tried not to tell anybody about that he was ever involved with Lung Ting. You know what I mean? And so it was just one of those things where it's just like, just tell people the truth. Just be honest with that. But I know that was a big deal as far as martial arts in the 80s and 90s. Okay, so
Yeah.
all right, we're gonna close it up here. I really want to thank you. Looking at culture in martial arts, it's such a big deal. But before we go, and before we tell everybody how they can reach you, which is going to be kind of crazy right now, but they can still reach you online. I need to know, in light of the fact that there is only one blockbuster left in the world, I need to know from you a video store memory. It's our video store memory segment.
Well, yeah, boy, I guess we all did that. And if you're a martial artist, you definitely, when you couldn't afford a bunch of videos, you either ended up at the library trying to find every old copy of anything about martial arts or boxing or wrestling, anything you could get your hands on, or you ended up at the video store hoping there was some new release, something, anything that you get your hands on. At the video store, what I remember was always being furious that mainstream entertainment, of course, always dominates the shelves. But then there'd be like a documentary section or an instructional section. And that thing was always like maybe half of one shelf. And there'd be like, how to cook or how to arrange a flour. But I would always go to that place first. As soon as I get to the store, Friday night, I'd say, well, maybe, just maybe, there's a how to defend yourself or how to do Kung Fu. And I don't even care what it is. I'm going to get it because I grew up not being able to afford videos. And I do remember, now that I'm thinking about it, finding like the David Carradine had like a Tai Chi video series of some kind. So he was trading on his Kung Fu show, teaching Tai Chi, I believe. It was a David Carradine Tai Chi thing. And he looks very mystical, I think, on the cover, if I remember it correctly. But just seeing something martial arts related that wasn't like a movie, that was like an instructional video, in that of 5 videos, that one of them had something to do with martial arts. Oh my God, I grabbed that thing and I took it home, and I don't know what I was expecting. I put that in like it was like finding gold.
Yes.
And then the video was not, it was underwhelming, but, and I no slam against anybody, but whatever. I think it was only like 38 minutes. It wasn't very substantial. It doesn't really teach me much about anything. But again, it was a sacred moment. Like, okay, I need the room. I got this tape. It took me years to find an actual VHS of something, and then to see that come on and have him take it very seriously and present these very simple things as if it was revealing all the secrets of the masters. I just remember that was kind of a moment.
Yeah.
of great happiness and great disappointment. Yin yang, I had the whole experience right there.
I've had that same experience before, actually. I do remember the
Okay.
David Carradine videos. The video or whatever it was. I never watched it. I never did get it. But there was a section at the video stores that popped up and went out of existence here. And every once in a while, there'd be a martial arts video there, you know, like a how-to martial arts or a documentary on something. You're like, man. And
Right.
yeah, I do remember getting those. Those were exciting.
Very
Ando,
rare.
tell people where they can find you and what you do, man.
Hey, I teach people martial arts the best I can. Things that have changed my life, I try to pass those things on. Fight for a happy life. If you put that into Google, you'll find me. If you put Sensei Ando in, you'll find me. Happy Life Martial Arts, you'll find me. Podcast, videos, online courses coming up as soon as I finish moving. I'm in an empty apartment here. Moving to Raleigh, North Carolina. I'll be doing in-person classes and training plus online courses. So you can't avoid me. Look up Ando. You'll find me.
Yes.
I hope you do.
Wealth of information. Your YouTube page is particularly phenomenal. I've enjoyed many of your videos on there. Stick with me. I'm going to close out the show, but stick with me. I'll talk for you just a second afterwards. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of Retro Serial. If you are listening to us on podcast, please give me a review and a rating. That would be awesome. If you're listening to this on YouTube or watching it on YouTube, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, the button. If you don't like this, you can push the thumbs down button, but make sure you hit it 2 times, and that'll really let me know that you disliked the video. Also share it on your favorite social media. That means a whole lot to me. I am trying to make all my wildest YouTube dreams come true. So I'm trying to get to above that 1,000 mark. And you can help for free. But if you do want to part with some of your hard-earned cash, you can by following the link below to the Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can help me spend your money. Yes, that's right. Help me spend your money. I love it. Please, no, everything goes here. You know, I mean, it goes to building up what we're doing here and making better videos and better quality videos. So thank you so much. Stay retro, everybody. We'll see you. And I will link to Ando's page, YouTube page, in the link in the description box below. So make sure you check that out as well. All right, take care.